afternoon, everyone. It's our second edition of the Con-Versation today. Like I said, there's going to be many changes coming to our channel, so this will be one of them. Instead of the Con Hour, we're going to probably focus on a couple of conversations on Tuesdays, so getting prepared for 2023. And we are here today with Mark Leslie, who's an author and a publisher. And we're going to be talking about some of his books and maybe a little bit about publishing if we can squeeze in the time for it. So welcome, Mark.
Hey, Greg, great to be here.
Now, one of the things that I did notice is that you've written nonfiction paranormal, which is a big focus for me. I love the paranormal realm, I would like to call it. So can you tell us a little bit about what got you into writing with the paranormal?
Yeah, I mean, all the writing, most of the writing I've done has been speculative. So, right, science fiction, fantasy, horror, stuff like that. More related to horror. And I've always been scared of the monster under the bed. I've always, there is a monster in my closet. There's one under the stairs in the basement. All the things that never left. I grew up physically, but I stayed a true believer my entire life of the things that go bump in the night and the terror and scared of all that. I had gone on a ghost walk in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada's capital, and when in the 90s, and fell in love with the idea of historical ghost stories and learning about a city. I think one of the best ways you can learn about a city when you go travel to it or move to is to go into the history of the city and the people and the culture. Then you get some great ghost stories. And then I just translated that into taking some of the research that I did on those trips and starting to, write them down and then explore more ghost stories and compile them together in different themes.
Very nice. Now, from what I gathered, you started writing at a very young age.
Yeah, age of 14. I found my mom's Underwood typewriter in the back of the closet, and I started to hammer out. This is way prior to the internet. Hammer out these submissions and send them to publishers. And I think I got my very first rejection from a publisher or a magazine, at least, if not like a book publisher, at the age of 15. And, since acquired thousands of rejections since then, but I didn't get my first story published till 1992, probably about 5-6 years later. And that was the same year that I graduated from university. The internet was starting to become sort of a thing, like, early days of the internet. And and that's when I started working in the book industry in parallel to my writing career.
Now, talking about first starting out, we're talking AOL days.
Yeah. Text-based internet, right? Before there were images, there used to be, I remember it was the Ottawa Carleton Freenet in Ottawa, which was just like text-based online bulletin boards and things like that in the very, very early days.
Yeah, we're talking early. Yeah, we're giving our age away here. We don't want to do that too much.
No, not too much. Not too much.
Now, was there something was it just fascination, or what really triggered you into writing? You found her typewriter, but was there something beforehand that triggered you into wanting to write?
Yeah, I think. I grew up an only child, and so I always played. The things I played in my mind, my imagination, with my little Fisher-Price figurines. I wanted to tell stories. Like, I grew up on comic books, Spider-Man, and all kinds of different comic books. Spider-Man was my big one. And I loved the stories. I loved reading. I enjoyed books. And when I was playing, my playing was with these little figures telling these stories. And I would even, like serialized comic books, have, continued, kind of like a TV series or whatever. And it would be like, Mark, it's dinner time. And then I would get to a point where I had to have a little suspenseful, cliffhanger. And then I would come back after dinner and continue the story. And I was only telling them to myself. But then I started to do these stick figure cartoons, and I realized the magic of what can happen when you put those stories on paper. You could leave them there and someone else could pick them up and discover them. or at a later date. And that's where I realized I wanted to share my stories. I wanted to do the things like share the stories that I'd read and enjoyed in the comic books, etc. And that just led to the desire, well, okay, I guess that's writer. And then putting it eventually became words. And I write. I couldn't write so fast. Like, and again, this was cursive writing, which I don't think we do much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the typewriter initially was because it was this big Underwood typewriter. Like I had that like hammer with my one finger, and it wasn't until high school when we actually had actual typing classes with typewriters that I learned how to touch type. And then the beauty of that was the magic of the words and all the things in my head could get onto the paper a lot faster, and I could almost keep up with my thoughts.
Now, you were talking with the comic books and the books and novels. Have you tried writing like a comic book type story where it's in the panels, or have you done that?
Yeah, actually. So the age of about 13, I had this. I played Dungeons and Dragons. You know, the early iterations of advanced D&D. If you remember Dungeons and Dragons, and then advanced D&D with Gary Gygax and
Gary Gygax.
Yeah, Gygax. And I was inspired by the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Conan the Barbarian. I remember the original, the comics of Conan the Barbarian that Marvel did. There was the big oversized ones and the smaller ones. And the D&D adventures I was having with my friends, and then wanting to write a story. So I started off and I had this big, thick, probably 50 or 60 pages of cartoon telling of the story of Aaron Bach, and that was a barbarian character, etc. And then after I finished that, I then sat down and tried to novelize it. I'd take the cartoons and the thought and the cartoon bubbles of the speech bubbles and turn it into narrative text. And that was at the age of 14. I spent the my summer vacation on this typewriter with my Dungeons and Dragons manuals out so I could do research and make sure I got the monsters right that they were encountering. And it was probably only about 30,000 words. So I thought it was an epic fantasy novel at the time. And that's kind of the first one. And I thought, oh, I'm going to take this cartoon thing I did. And I remember even the fight scenes, play acting them out myself and going, okay, well, if he takes the knife and he goes to stab this way, the other guy's going to dodge that way. And that's how I do it myself, draw the little stick figures or cartoons, and then try to type it out and describe that. I mean, it was very rudimentary, but I mean, God, I amused myself for months.
Well, that's definitely one way to do research, I have to say. I've written fantasy, so yeah, you really do have to do that at times. It's like, can a person really do this? No, but they can do this. So
is this physically possible? Yeah.
So, how many books do you have out per se?
I don't about 30, somewhere in that realm. About 30 books. I have a bunch of books traditionally published. I have a bunch of indie or self-published titles. I have a series, a fiction series, My Canadian Werewolf, which is humorous, paranormal adventure. Starts with a Canadian Werewolf in New York. That I'm about to release book 6 coming out in March. I've got 6 books of true ghost stories, and I've got a couple more in the works, and another half dozen books for writers, and then a lot of I have some standalone horror novels and short story collections and books I've edited. So I've edited speculative and fiction and horror anthologies as well. So roughly somewhere in the realm of about 30 books there.
Sweet. Now I'm going to have to go check a lot of this out.
Well, several of them are free. Online.
Do you go to conventions to do signings or?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in the last couple of years, it's been a challenge, and so I do go to some cons, some Comic Cons. I was at Frightmare in the Falls. Now I'm in Ontario, Canada, and Niagara Falls, Ontario. They have this wonderful Frightmare in the Falls, and that was in, I guess, the end of October, the beginning of November, sometime around. It was close to Halloween, and that was fantastic. I usually get a booth, a place like that. One of the challenges with the U.S. is I go to a lot of conferences to speak to other writers in the States, but bringing merchandise across the border is cost prohibitive. Like the taxes and all of that is a challenge. So I have a friend who does that, and he has a friend he ships stuff to the US, and so he doesn't have to cross the border with merchandise. But so I have to figure out a better way of doing that. But otherwise, I'd love to go to a lot of the cons in the States because they're so much bigger than the ones we have here in Canada.
Well, I think I know one that's actually going to be close to you if my geography is correct. But there's actually one in Clayton, New York.
Okay. All right.
Which is called AnchorCon.
AnchorCon. So, yeah, and New York is, I can get to New York, upstate New York, in about 2 hours, crossing the border, and often go, and, obviously it take 12 hours or 10 hours to get to New York City, but Clayton's in closer to upstate New York, isn't it?
Yes. It's actually between, I got to think here, Erie and Ontario, the lakes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that would probably be, I'd probably get there in about 4 or 5 hours, which would make a lot of sense. I love that idea.
So I'll have to send you that information.
Yeah.
Now, you're also a publisher.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say, can we go into the aspects of that and how you work with people for
publishing?
Yeah,
so I'm not a publisher like a traditional publisher like a Penguin or a Random House or something like that. I have published some books of friends of mine, but I got into it because I was following the conventional wisdom of writing and publishing was, write some short stories, sell them to magazines or anthologies or small press markets, build a name for yourself, and then eventually, when you get enough credits, you'll catch the attention of an editor. So when you submit a book manuscript to an editor or an agent, you can say, hey, I've been published in this magazine and that magazine, et cetera, et cetera. And I did that, had dozens and dozens of stories, published, thousands of rejections to get that. And I got to a point, I was working in the book industry, and people would say, so you're a writer? And I'd say, yeah, I'm a writer. And they said, well, where can I get your writing? And I'd say, well, interesting story. Okay, if you get, because we're Ontario, okay, if you get in a car and you drive 2 hours, you cross over in upstate New York, there's Black River, there's a great, there's a town, another hour drive, into New York State, and you can get there, and you can get, I'm in a magazine, a small press magazine, Circulation 500, and it's available at these 2 stores, or through subscription. Again, there wasn't an internet per se back then, and people. And I'd say, oh, but you got to get there before the end of the month because it'll be off the shelf and then it'll be done. So I was getting these stories out there, but they weren't staying. They were like in a magazine and then they were gone. They were in something and then they were gone. And so it was 2004 that I was getting tired of saying, well, I work in a bookstore and you can't even get my stuff in bookstores. And so what I did is I created, I learned about print on demand, self-publishing, and I took a bunch of my previously published horror stories and just compiled them into a collection called One Hand Screaming. Now, because back then self-publishing was thought of as not very cool, what I did is I friend was a graphic designer for me, and I registered a company, Stark Publishing. Now, my best friend Steve and myself, he got the first 2 letters. I got the last 3 letters. We had a DJ company when we were in college called Stark Entertainment. And I was like, hey, can I use this? And he even designed me, he's the graphic designer, designed me a logo, Stark Publishing, so I could hide behind the fact that I was self-publishing. And what I did is I collected these stories and made them available. And they were available through bookstores. I was able to, call up a Barnes & Noble when I was traveling through the States, and they could order them from Ingram, get them in stock, and return them if they didn't sell. And so I started Stark Publishing in 2004, and then I did a bunch of books through Stark Publishing. And of course, I've edited anthologies with Stark Publishing, where I've published other writers. I've other book authors of that I know. Or mostly called.
Okay. I'm either losing video or you're losing video here.
Yeah, it kind of went for a second, didn't it?
Yeah. Just a minute, though. Sorry about that. Now, with the anthologies, if somebody wanted to send you their story, how would they do that?
Yeah, right now I'm not doing any open readings or any submissions, so I'm
Okay.
not accepting submissions. But when I have done anthologies, I'll post, I'll share, hey, I'm reading from this time to this time. I'm looking for stories on this theme. That's usually posted online on my website at markleslie.ca, or I'll share it with the various markets like Rowland.com and places like that where people can find short story markets.
And you said Mark Leslie CA?
Markleslie.ca. Yeah.
.ca. There we go. See if I got this right so people can go look for it.
There you go. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Very good. So can they get signed books from you through that, or?
Yeah, I do have people try to order print copies for me directly, and I mail them to them. I'll be honest with you, the cost of shipping from Canada is probably cost more than the book, unfortunately.
That's true.
But yeah, I'm trying to have done things in the past with a local bookstore where if people order from the local bookstore, bookstore would contact me, I'd come in and sign, because usually the bookstores have the ability to ship. But my books are available to order at all the major retailers. They're all available in print, all available in ebook, and about half of them are available in audio as well. And they can be requested through the library too. So you can get them for free in the various formats too.
Good. But I do want to thank you for being on our show. I was glad to have you with us. And like I said, with the paranormal and stuff like that, let's see if we can get you scheduled back in October. I'll talk to a publicist about that so we can really have a good show about the paranormal.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I look forward to it.
Definitely. But again, thank you for being on. And everybody, this will be the last show for the day. And we will start back up with a couple more conversations tomorrow. And until then, adios.